Well, hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're creating a wasteboard for your laser engraver. Well, we've been doing quite a few laser shows on the Tuesday episode of the program, and there's been a great response from a lot of you out there that have your home lasers. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue that little series today by creating a wasteboard. Now, a wasteboard is one of those things that can be so useful when doing any kind of engraving. And I've had people ask me, how do you line up your pieces? How do you know that they're where you want them to be in order to engrave them? And it's all about the wasteboard. So let's head over to the table saw in this case, and let's have a look at how we're going to make this happen. Now, it's pretty hard to make a wasteboard without the actual board. And you can choose whatever you want to make your wasteboard out of, but the important part is to make it effective, it should be rigid and it should be something that you can mount your laser to. Because one of the key components of a wasteboard is repeatability. And a laser engraved wasteboard is absolutely useless if your laser can shift all over the place. For the longer Ray 520 watt, I've actually had to drill and tap our side brackets here so that I could get some angle brackets to mount this laser in a solid position. I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter. I've taken a lot of time to mark out where everything goes here and to make sure that everything is square to my board. It doesn't matter if it's square to the board. If you are off by 5 degrees, you can be off by 5 degrees. As long as you are off by 5 degrees every single time, it has to be consistent, and it consistently has to be in the same spot in order to make a wasteboard useful. So let's head over to the computer and see if we can't get this wasteboard made up. Well, the first thing we're going to start off with, obviously, is to open up our Lightburn. And you want to make sure that you're set for the laser you're using. In this case, I have this set for the longer Ray 520 watt. The reason for that is the different work areas. The longer Ray 5 has a work area of 375 by 375. But if you were to change, let's just say, to the X tool D1, the X tool has a working area of 430 by 430. So you want to make sure that you're making a wasteboard for the laser that you're going to be using it for. So 375 by 375. Now, in my experience, guys, due to the fact that these things, or some of these lasers, have limit switches, you can't necessarily do a full-size working grid. And that's okay, because, I mean, I've never ever engraved to the full limits of our laser. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is create a line. So we're going to click our pencil here, and we will just draw a straight line, just like this. And then to prevent your second line from being drawn, you can just click Escape. And now we have our one line. Now, it's a little difficult to see this line, but that's because I have it set, it looks like, yes, in a blue layer. So I'm going to change this layer. We'll just select our line, and we're going to change it to our black layer just to make it a little more visible. So at this point in time, this is what you want to do. You want to, for starters, make sure that your line is perfectly on any line here. It doesn't matter which one it is. But you want to make sure that it's perfectly vertical, and we can see that it is here. And we want to highlight it, and we're going to decide how big our grid is going to be. We know that we have 375 by 375, but we want to be able to have labels there to tell us the measurements. So we need to leave a little bit of space. So I'm going to come in on each side. Instead of 375 by 375 millimeters, I'm actually going to make a grid that will only be 365 millimeters. So we can change our length of our line to 365. Now we can see here that it is way too far off the one end. So we're just going to lower that down. And if we're happy with that line and the length, we can carry on. Looking at it though, it looks like I'm not really giving myself enough room to work. So I'm going to reduce this even more. And instead of 365, I'm going to go 355. That'll give me 20 millimeters to play with, top and bottom. So I think that should be fine right about there. So I'm going to move this line all the way over to our left and make sure that we have it aligned here somewhere. It doesn't matter. And we're going to click Array. That is this little group of squares over here. And our menu for the array will come up. Now, number of columns, that's what we want, X. We don't want to do anything with the Y, but our spacing is going to be 10 millimeters. That will give us a space on this grid, every single one of these squares. Every 10 millimeters, it will give us a line. And we just have to decide now, how many do we want? So as we click, we can see that it's drawing them across. Now we don't want to go too crazy because again, we need room for measurements. So I think we're going to stop it there. We got 36. I'm going to drop back one, 35. All right, so there we go. We should stop that there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this all again, and I'm going to shift it over so that it will line up with our grid lines here that we're showing on our Lightburn program. You can see there now all of our lines are joined up. All right, so if we look up here, we've got them all highlighted. If we look at the width, we are 340 millimeters wide. That is an important measurement to know. So we're now going to draw a line. So I've clicked on our pencil here. We're going to start drawing. There we go. It is keeping our line perpendicular here. We'll just click, and then we need to click escape so that we know that's our only line. It'll get us out of that line drawing phase. So we're now going to highlight that line, and if you remember, the width of our line was 340 of all of our lines across was 340. So we're going to make this line 340. We're going to lock that in. So before we carry on, what we want to do is we want to group all of our vertical lines here. You can highlight them all. We will click Arrange and Group. That will now make all of these lines one, with the exception of our horizontal line, which is by itself. We can now highlight that, and we can align vertical center. You can see now that's got them aligned, and we will click here and align the top. All right. See, now there's the top line of our grid. And now if we highlight that top line and go back into our array, the last time we did the X columns. This time we want the Y. So the Y spacing here again will be 10 millimeters. And we want to just click down for as many as we want. And in this case, we will click down until we get to the bottom of our grid. Let me just zoom in on that here. Looks like we need two more. 1, 2. There we go. But if you remember, we made our horizontal grid, or our vertical lines, we made them 355. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that height now. We're going to make it at 360. Enter, and now we should be able to do just like we did before. But what we're going to do is the vertical lines we're going to drag out of here for now so that we can group all of our horizontal lines, and we'll just arrange and group. That now becomes one. And then if we drag right to left, that highlights and encompasses everything And we can align those vertical center and align them horizontal center. And we can click arrange and group those, and now we have a perfectly laid out grid. My only issue here is that I think it has become too large for our engraver to actually handle, because I think the limit switches are going to kick in before we can ever engrave this. So what I'm thinking is that I'm going to make this a little smaller. You can see up here in the top, I have 15 millimeters up here in the top, but in the bottom, I have nothing. So I think what I'm going to do for argument's sake is I'm going to bring this back 20 millimeters, and we are going to make this a little bit of a smaller space. And once you're happy with your grid and you've got it all aligned, we can now add our values. Here's the thing, guys. You don't want to add just any old values here. You want to zoom in, and we can see our values here off to the left, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up. These are the values that you want to add to your grid. Now, I don't think we need a video of how to add them, but just to refresh your memory, it's a single click here, click down where you want it, add your value. In this case, it was 20 millimeters, and that's it, you're done. And then you can add the next one, and so on, 30, and then 40, and then you keep going. Once you've done that, you can get them all aligned, get them set to where you want them, and then we need to test this and frame it with our laser. And as long as you're happy with the way everything looks on your screen and you have framed it out and it frames properly on your wasteboard, you can just focus your laser to your wasteboard and then click Start to engrave this entire grid onto your piece of plywood. And you end up with something like this. So guys, what is the point? Now, I've added circles to mine. That's just because in some things that I do, I like to set them to the center of my project, and I can use these circles to line them up. But what is the point of this whole grid? Well, the whole grid and the whole purpose is that you have duplicated your Lightburn grid here in your laser. Over here, we can see that I have it set to absolute coordinates, but a lot of people like to use current position. In other words, wherever your laser head is, right at that moment, that's where it starts lasering. But I like to use absolute coordinates. So let me show you how this works. We're just going to start a new project here, and if I do a little square, it doesn't matter what size square, we're just going to make a little small square, and we're going to make it just small, just 20 by, let's say, 20 by 40 millimeters. It's just a small little square. We're just going to engrave it, cut layers, so that it is a line drawing and, well, sure, 180 power, whatever. We're not going to cut through this material. But what we can do, let's just zoom in here. And let's say if I have this pattern marked at, let's say, I'm going to put it here at 140 on the x-axis and 250 on the y-axis. You know what, let's make it a little easier so that I can remember it. Let's go 250 and 250. Just like that. So the top corner is marked, or is set rather, at 250 millimeters in on this grid and 250 on this grid. So if I take my material and line it up with the 250 line And then I check over here, and this is the 250 line right across here. So I bring this down, and now I am lined up at 250 and 250. But I don't want it right at the edge. So, you know what, let's go 240 and bring it up 10 mils. So this here, having it lined up like this should engrave that square 10 millimeters down from the top and 10 millimeters in from the edge. So let's give it a try and see how it goes. So as a force of habit for me, I prefer to always hone my laser. That way I know I'm starting from the very first position. So once this hones, I'm not even going to frame it. I'm just going to click the start button and let it engrave. And we'll just shut this off so you can hear me. And guys, check this out. 10 millimeters from the left. 10 millimeters from the top. I didn't frame it. I didn't do anything. All I did was read the coordinates off of the Lightburn program, line them up here in my laser enclosure, and instantly lined up. So you're wondering how I get them lined up? I do a wasteboard that is suited for this laser. Guys, as long as your laser never moves, you will always have this reference to your screen, and you will always be able to perfectly line up your projects and have a lot less wasted material and a lot less bad burns. And there you have it. Making a wasteboard for your laser engraver. Guys, this is a phenomenal modification to anyone who has a diode laser at home that they use for their projects. It doesn't matter what brand you have, it doesn't matter how big it is or the wattage, it makes no difference. This gives you the ability to line up your materials and your engraving so perfectly, it will blow your mind. All of those scale models that I do, and I do those perfect little engravings on them, and they're always so straight and always so square, and they look so great on the model, and everyone's like, holy crow, how did you do that? That's amazing. It's so perfectly lined up. It's not rocket science. I lined it up on the computer screen, read the coordinates that are sitting there right on the screen, and then I just sat my piece in the engraver on those coordinates. Pretty much every engraver I have has one of these burn boards or waste boards. There's a lot of different names for them. But what it does is it really brings your engraving to the next level, not only in having everything lined up and straight, but also for your own sanity. You don't go crazy trying to line it up, frame, line it up, frame, line it up, frame. You'll go crazy doing that. If you still want to frame, I suggest doing it. It's always a good idea. But with the grid, you can just line it up, frame, and go. It's pretty rare that you have to change anything. Now you can modify it however you want. I even have in mind for this one a little circle in the middle. That's 1 3/4 of an inch. And if you look, you can see it's labeled 1 3/4 inch wheels. That is for labeling or engraving the tires on scale models. So I know that as long as I center my engraving on the computer to the center of the screen, I can line my wheel right up there, right on that 1 3/4 inch engraved circle, and it will be perfect every time. It will always be centered. There's so much you could do. There's so many ways that this could improve your engraving. This is a project that if you're into laser engraving and you have your own engraver, this is one that you need to have a look into. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I've been looking forward to getting this laser set up as a permanent shop laser for a while, and doing the grid and everything today has just taken it to the next level. So I hope that you're going to take yours to the next level as well. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We've got an amazing audience base here, and I'm hoping that you're going to consider becoming a part of it. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. I hope that you found something useful here and were able to take something positive away from it. I hope you're going to set up your own grid and take your laser engraving and your alignment to the next level. But more importantly, guys, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.